cover two melachot, very important melachot we come across quite often. Kotev and mohek. Kotev means to write, mohek means to erase. When we talk about kotev, what is involved in writing, believe it or not, it even includes hieroglyphics. It even includes hieroglyphics, the Egyptian picture writing. It includes Chinese writing, any type of symbol that has meaning. So when you write, regardless of the language you use, any yetirat tmuna, any picture or diagram that you create that says something, says or expresses an idea, is a sur, regardless of the language you use. That is kotev. Kotev is to create in any form, any language, something in writing. We will see there's different types of writing. An idea that you want to express. So it could be in any language, any form of writing, and it could include all these that I wrote here in Hika, which means basically whether you're using ink to apply your idea, or whether you're using etching, or carving, or sculpting, right? All of these forms of shaping something into something meaningful, an idea that is expressed in any language and form, would be kotev, midoraita. Another possibility, even though some may be more midrabanan, we'll see later, there's an important condition of what makes something midoraita or midrabanan. Nevertheless, it's still asur. Another form of writing would be to use arodi lefader kabim, which means to take any lines or pieces of anything. You're not creating yourself by writing, or designing, sculpting, or etching, but you're taking material that already exists and putting them together to form something that will have some permanence to it, of course. And this could be even using food or using certain types of toys. If you're forming them or using them in some way meaningful, it can be asur, at least midrabanan. Yeah, and I'm going to give examples soon. Right. I did not necessarily say with this that all toys are asur. What I meant to say with this point is just that you don't necessarily have to write or use your a pen or something. You could use existing material in putting something together. That would also be a form of ktiva, of writing that would be asur. But since we're talking about including toys, I gave a few examples. The one that is the most problematic is a tashbet, a puzzle. The reason why it's a little bit more problematic is because the pieces stick together. Now, if kids want to play by themselves, little children, you can let them play. But an adult should definitely not put together a puzzle on Shabbat. Because you're forming a picture, and even though it's not something real and strong, nevertheless, because the pieces can stick together tightly, that is the criteria here. Pieces sticking together tightly, forming something meaningful, then one should stay away from it. You can argue whether it's a suit or not, but at least one should not do so on Shabbat if he's an adult. However, Scrabble, the regular Scrabble game, where you're just putting letters together, letters that already exist, right? So you did not create the letters. You're taking letters and putting one letter next to another. That's not asur, that's mutar. You can play Scrabble, this kind of Scrabble. Well, of course, yeah. So this kind of, the simple Scrabble, I hear there's a Scrabble Deluxe or something, where there is yeah, right, obviously. Scrabble is on mitaki motiyot. You already have the letters, and you put together the words, to form words. So if the letters are there already, all you're doing is forming words and putting them close to each other. Mechatim tawfiyot, the chibur of the otiyot, the connecting of the letters to form a word is not a problem. It's not a problem. Okay? No problem. The only problem that there could be is if you were to put it in a frame where they would stick together and stay together. That may be more of a problem. But if it's not on a frame, if it's pretty loose, you just bring them in close together to form words, letters that already exist, that's perfectly fine. The Scrabble would be okay. The simple Scrabble. But if it's in some sort of frame where you're putting it together, then it would resemble a puzzle. Anything that brings them together and makes them stay together might be questionable. Alright, even though writing in itself is prohibited, if you take a W and make it a V, right, by cutting it in half, taking any letter and cutting it in half where you are making a new letter, two letters, that's also a form of ktiva. That would be asur. So you did not create a new letter per se. The way you formed it was by cutting an existing letter. Since you're creating a new letter, that would also be asur in Shabbat. No, we're going to talk about that. Under mohek, we're going to talk about that. Let's say your handle makes no difference, right? Whether it's the tavim kol chomer, whether it was made of all sorts of material. Like, no. Food we'll talk about next. I don't know if it's next or soon. We'll talk about food. Cakes and cookies that have letters on them. But when we're talking about breaking a letter in two, we're talking about regular letters that are written, etched, sculpted, or kol chomer acher, if it's made from all sorts of material, if you put together letters. Right? If you cut it in half and formed a new letter, that would be a form of tiva as well. And the same is true with using wire or rope, to design a particular letter. that would be similar to chomer, and we call chomer, from any material. It would also be prohibited, even though it's made of another material. It's not your regular ink applied on a piece of paper. It's still also. Yeah, well, obviously it would have to have some sort of shape and form. Well, then that's nothing. That's nothing. Yeah, well, that comes under the category of food, so I don't want to make it too. And we're going to discuss the difference between tivah mitkayemet and lo mitkayemet. There is an important condition in writing that it has to have some degree of permanence. If it's not permanent, then it may not be assumed doraita. So any form, regardless of any material you use, is a surah. Another important condition is when you're writing, it has to have, in order for it to be assumed Torah at least, it has to be balat mashmaut. It has to have some meaning. You just scribble. It's a surah to just scribble. It's not the exact tivah, which is prohibited in the Torah. In order for it to be assumed in the Torah, it has to have meaning. You have to have been creating something that's meaningful. Otherwise, it's just, like I wrote in Hishkushim. Hishkushim is just scribble, meaningless, and it would not be assumed in the Torah. Regardless, even if it was a pen. Right. We're not talking about the additional problems. There can be always additional problems, right? Like we'll say, all sorts of things. You're building something, you're sculpting something. So there always can be additional problems. So kishkush, the scribble, would not be assumed doraita. All right, another area that is included in kotev, taking a picture, a camera. You shouldn't tell a goy to take your picture on Shabbat, because you can't tell a goy to do something you can't do ordinarily, right? And taking a picture, photographing, that imprint is a permanent impression, which is just like tivah. It doesn't have to be letters. It could be, as we said before, any impression, any form, anything that was created, whether a picture or a letter, would be asur. So photographs would be asur. And the same thing would be with tirtutim, with sketches. Any kind of sketch would be asur, or any rishumim. Rishumim is, let's say, you want to keep track of something, and you use some siman, rishum, something that you write down, that is not a letter or a number, just to keep track, a check mark. That would also be asur because it means something. So even though it's not a letter, it would be asur as well. Another few items that would be included and would be just as asur: shorthand, braille. Braille is what the blind people have for being able to communicate, and tiyatus vaot, fingerprinting. So you can't take your fingerprint on Shabbat, because that fingerprint, and most people, will not think of it, but I'm going to tell you soon where that may be necessary. But usually that's not a problem. But fingerprinting, because it leaves a mark, a meaningful mark, it cannot be done on Shabbat. It's meaningful. Yeah, we're going to talk about that under mohek. Yeah, well, that you may not do it intentionally, if you left a mark unintentionally or something else. So all of these forms of writing, of leaving impressions and marks, are asur at least midrabanan. They may be asur midoraita as well. Yeah. We're going to get to that. Yeah. The reason I come late is because I spend a lot of time going through all the possibilities, as much as possible. You can still ask, but it's here. Another idea that is prohibited is ktival gabe aor. You cannot write on your own skin. Some people don't have a piece of paper. They write, what's your phone number? And they write it on their hand. Regardless of what their intention is, to write on the skin is just like writing on any other surface. The skin is considered a surface that you can write on. Things can be written on the skin, and therefore it's asur. Any type of codes is also prohibited. As we said before, anything that is meaningful is asur. So this one would also be. Okay, I said before that it makes a difference whether the writing is mitayemet or not mitayemet. I briefly mentioned that, and that's very important. The writing which is assumed in the Torah is really only a ktiva shemitayemet. It has some degree of permanence. If it disappears after a little while, it's not assumed d'oraita, but it's assumed d'rabanan. So as I said earlier, there are some items here that may be assumed d'rabanan. One of them is if it's not permanent. So therefore, if you have a window that is fogged up, right, and you write on that, that's assumed d'rabanan. It's not assumed d'oraita because it's not permanent. It's going to disappear. That's not real writing. We don't do it anyway because it resembles writing, and it's therefore assumed d'rabanan. Little kids do that all the time, but adults should know better than that. That any type of writing, even on sand, even though it may not be permanent, because it's a form of writing, it would be assumed d'rabanan. That's an important condition to remember because it can help us, in certain situations where we need to, as we're going to see later. There are some situations where we need to write on Shabbat. What do we do? So obviously, if something is not permanent, it's better than if it is permanent. Okay, now let's talk about real life applications. All right, pictures, we pretty much covered. Photographs, any type of paintings would be asur to make on Shabbat. What about an X-ray? Okay, you come to the hospital and you're complaining that your hand is swollen, can't move it, hurts you. Maybe it's broken. There's a broken bone. The doctor says we need to take an X-ray. problem is an X-ray is a form of impression. It's a silum. It's like a photograph. Oh, Baruch Hashem, you know already. Obviously, the big difference would be if it's an emergency or not. If the doctor says it's important that I immediately take a picture, I immediately take an X-ray right now, we could let him do that for you. Goy or Jew. Obviously, it's better if a Goy does it. So if it's immediately, if you can push it off, you push it off. Because it's the same idea. If it's not an issue of pikuach nefesh, even if it's not a pikuach nefesh, if it's a serious injury, we don't know how serious it is, serious enough to be considered serious, then we allow the doctor to make that decision. There's no, I need this right away. This would make a big difference. And the doctor can determine if something is serious, if something needs an X-ray right away. If you do not require an X-ray right away, if you could wait till after Shabbat, then you wait till after Shabbat. You don't allow him to take the X-ray right away. If that's a photograph, an impression, that is not necessary. It does not have to be made right now, and it's a form of ktiva, just like a photograph. So that would be an example of a situation that you may have to think about it before you do it. In the Gemara, it's brought down, I think it's in Yerushalmi, the rabbis tell us that the people who live in the East, maybe they meant the Chinese, I don't know who they meant, or the Indians from India. They said the people in the East were very smart. Why? Because they invented an invisible ink. And when they would want to communicate with their friends and write something that was secret, they would write it with this invisible ink, send the paper, the letter, to its destination. The people at the destination would apply on the paper a special ink that they would throw on it, and that would make all the letters come out. It's not a fact, but that's what that would do. The ink, whatever they would apply on it, they would smear on it or pour on it, would make the letters come out. So this existed, this technology, whatever you want to call it. But this would be a Surah Shabbat too, to make the letters come out. That would be a form of Kiva too. I'm sure they have similar things today, sure. That under certain lighting, you can see it. It's invisible ink that spies, for example, use. I'm sure they have all sorts of, ultraviolet, all sorts of things that they can use today to make it transparent or invisible. I'm sure, yeah. Messages, communication, sure. Really. Either way, it's a Surah. But even bringing out the letters by putting that ink would also be. Alright, this one is not that important, but for academic reasons, I wrote it here. Writing on a computer. I said for academic reasons because you can't use a computer on Shabbat anyway because of the electricity, right? So it's academic. The writing of a computer is also considered perhaps a form of writing. It's not, of course, a sur midoraita because it's not a ktiva midoraita. It's not permanent. It disappears, right? And it's not permanently etched. No, that's not a problem. Your instruments can work on Shabbat, that's good. But I'm saying, had you had the opportunity to write on a computer, the computer would not be a sur midoraita as far as ktiva is concerned. You know where this comes in a little handy? In Chol HaMoed. In Chol HaMoed, which is coming up next week, you're not allowed to write certain things in certain ways. With Rabbana, right? But with a computer, there would be no problem. See, that would be the difference. I mean, just plain a little bit of writing, simple writing, is not a problem. Chol HaMoed. A certain type of writing may be asur. Writing using a computer would not be a problem in Chol HaMoed. And printing is already a different problem because printing would be a real ktiva on Shabbat, right? On Chol HaMoed, you're not printing. Your printer is printing. But as far as Shabbat is concerned, that would be a real kiva. The printer is a form of writing. But the computer and the monitor, the information that's going on the hard disk or on the floppy, that's not called real kiva. At least not midoraita. Alright, what about a combination lock? A combination lock, right? Man'ul firufim, I wrote it. Where you take numbers and put certain numbers together. What? You're putting certain numbers together. It's not a problem. It's mutar to use on Shabbat. Yeah. Because that's similar to the letters, like the scramble. You're putting one next to another. Putting letters that already exist or numbers that already exist close to each other is not a problem. Okay, now we're getting serious. Not that this wasn't serious, but what do you do if you're in the hospital and you or one of your relatives has to go through surgery and they're going to make you sign? If they don't sign, they don't want you. They don't want to go. It's risky, right? That's why they make you sign. That you are aware of the risks and you give them permission, you authorize them to go ahead with it. And it's Shabbat. So what do you do? Now, obviously, if it's pikuach nefesh, if it's an emergency, you don't ask questions, and you go ahead and do almost anything. What we're talking about is that it's not a pikuach nefesh, but the surgery needs to be done now. You can't write, you can't sign your name, because that's ktiva. So the first thing you need to do is try to push it off. See if you can get away with it, not to sign your name. That's number one. Or have the goy sign for you, if they accept that. If nothing works whatsoever, and they don't accept it, and will not go through it unless you sign your name, then what you should do is write with a shinui, using your left hand possible, and write as short as possible. In other words, your initials, not your full name. In other words, with the shinui, in other words, if you have to do something, then you at least try to minimize it as much as possible. That's the idea over here. So you do it with a shinui, using your left hand, if you can, and you write as little as possible. That's the halakha of what to do when you need to sign in the hospital. Now in Israel, I heard that they came up with an ink that only lasts for a couple hours, until Motzei Shabbat. You sign your name with this ink, with this pen, and comes along Motzei Shabbat, you sign your name again with real ink. By that time, the ink is already disappearing. So it's davar she'eno mitkayem, right? Yes, but for something like this, it's less of a problem, right? What do we just say? You try to minimize the problem as much as possible. So you write as little as possible, you write with the shinui, and this one is not a permanent ink. So it's only midrabanan. It's less of a problem. If you do that with the shinui, it's for sure good. So the Israeli scientists, Jewish scientists, are coming up with all sorts of technologies to minimize the problem. Now, this pen would be a Shabbos pen, right? Yeah. If something is designated for the use of Shabbat, it's not muktzeh, right? Unless it's something that cannot be designated for the use of Shabbat, like something which is electrical, you can't use it, right? But a stick or a stone that is muktzeh, if you have some application, some use for it on Shabbat, something, as long as you have that in mind before Shabbat. Eventually we'll talk about muktzeh. Alright, so that's what you would do in the hospital. What do you do, however, if you're not in the hospital, you're at home, and Federal Express comes to your door? Fine, please. Now what do you do? Yes, of course, we're talking about Shabbat. Now with the Federal Express, remember there's several problems here. There's the problem of the signing, there's the problem of perhaps the package is muktzeh, and there's a problem of how you receive it from him. Because if you're standing outside and you receive it from him, and then you bring it into your home, so you're taking something from the Shut HaRabim into the Shut HaYachid, into your home. What? No. If we're talking about two separate reshuyot, all you need is a couple of inches. I mean, it makes no difference. You're taking from here and putting it in here. So there's various issues here. So let's talk about issue number one. What do you do with the signing? Let him sign it if he agrees to, right? Same thing like in the hospital. Try to push it off. Yeah, if you can send him away, come another day, that's fine too. But it may be a very important package. So if at all possible, you try not to sign it. This one is not like in the hospital that you should do it with the shinui. So this one you can avoid. You can make him come back another time. Tell him that you can't sign it. He should sign it for you. Usually they are willing more to sign it for you than the doctors are. So in this case, you should not sign it. Have him sign it or have him come back. And if he gives it to you anyway, tell him to put it down in a safe place. You cannot bring it into the house. If he's still in the Shut HaRabim, you are in the Shut HaYachid. Right. Yeah, he can put it down in a safe place. You can tell him where to put it down. In any safe place. If he's already pretty much in the house, then you can just put it down anywhere. The problem really is when he's in the Shut HaRabim and the Shut HaYachid, and you're going to take it from him while you are in the Shut HaRabim, and then bring it into the house, that's going to be a problem. Or even if he hands it to you while you're in the house, that's a little bit of a problem. So these are things to be aware of when you get mail. The whole idea of mail is an area in itself in halakha. What do you do on Shabbat? You can't have things that are muktzeh in it. You can't open it anyway. You can handle it. It all depends what kind of mail it is. If it's not muktzeh, then of course you can just put it away. What is that? Right, that was the issue of muktzeh, depending on what the package contains. No, not really. There's different opinions on how to handle mail. What do we do when mail arrives? But we're a little bit more lenient with handling, unless you know that there's money or checks that can be, something that can be muktzeh. That's different. So these are the various concerns to be aware of when something comes to your door, like Federal Express, and they ask you to sign. It can be muktzeh, it can be a problem of putting something from the Shut HaRabim and the Shut HaYachid, and so forth. Alright, just another item that I added here at the end. Walking on snow, even though your heels or your shoes may have letters or something on them that will make a shape or form on the snow, permissible, it's not a problem. You don't intend to do it when you're walking on it. And if it just happens, it happens. And it's not permanent anyway. So you don't have to be concerned about where you go and where you step. You can leave imprints, any type of prints left by your shoes. That's okay. As long as you don't do it intentionally. It happens as you're walking. Before we go to Mohek, there are two important areas that I'd like to discuss now, even though they don't really have too much to do with Kotev, but they are Gzerot, they are decrees that the Chachamim made, because they may lead somebody to write. Follow me? And to keep a heshbon. One of them is Nihul, I call it in Hebrew Nihul Atakim, doing certain types of business transactions on Shabbat. Now we all know that we don't do business on Shabbat. But let me show you a scenario which is permissible, and still you have to be very careful. Let's say you live in a very tight Jewish community that has an eruv, that means that you're allowed to carry, okay? And you just invited 25 guests from Shul, that they're going to have anywhere to go. You're surprising your wife. Oh, I need some more fruit, I need some more vegetables. Can't cook on Shabbat, right? But these fruits and vegetables. Where am I going to get this now? Shabbat. Well, let's go ask Yaakov to open up his shop so I can grab a sack of apples, right? Pay him after Shabbat. Or Yom Tov, when you're allowed to cook. I need some more potatoes and onions. Go ask Yaakov to bring you a bag of potatoes or onions. That's mutar. In principle, this type of arrangement to ask the neighbor, the grocery man, on Shabbat to open up the shop to give you some more fruits or vegetables or whatever, that in itself is permissible. As long as three conditions are met. And I didn't write it here because I didn't know if I was going to have room here. You have to be careful with three conditions. Besides the fact that there's an eruv, otherwise you can't carry. So there needs to be an eruv. Number one, you can't mention anything about buying or selling. Can you sell me? Can I buy from you? Right? We don't want this to appear like a regular business transaction. Yeah, but you don't mention anything that has to do with buying. Number one is not to mention any language that contains the word buying or selling. Condition number two is that you don't say anything that has to do with payment. How much is this? I'm going to pay you, right? Nothing to do with the pricing or the payment. One second. Condition number three is that you do not take anything b'midah b'mishkal. Please give me 12 ounces of paprika, right? Something that has to be measured, right? If it has to be measured or it has to be counted, right? Not counted, weighed, right? Midah b'mishkal, that you don't do. These are the basic three conditions. We don't want it to look like regular business. What you can say is, please give me a bag of potatoes, v'nachnu nistader achrei Shabbat, like we say in Hebrew, and we'll take care of it after Shabbat. That's all. That's all you say. Now, in a tight-knit community, in a community where the people trust each other, I'd like to, please let me know if you know one like that, where there's a community where people, it would be very nice. Yeah, it used to be, right? But that's those kind of situations where people trust each other, tight-knit community, there's an eruv. You can do something like that. There's no problem here. You need a little bit more food. He has it in the store. There's no issue here. Just make sure you don't do it in such a way that it resembles regular business, because you may come to write. In other words, the whole idea over here was a dirah. It should not be done in a regular way, so you should not come to eventually write down and keep track of what the cheshbon is. How much do I owe you? I still owe you from last time. Don't bring it up now. It has nothing to do with payment. Very true. Good point. So what do? You open up the back door. Not the front door, right? Yeah, you definitely don't want to open up the store and show your face there and show. Right. You don't want to show the store is open. That's very true. Good point. Yeah, you want to do it discreetly. That's it. Right. So obviously you don't want to stay there for long. You just go out and bring in the back door a bag of potatoes. That's okay. So in the same way that we have this zerot with nehul asakim, with all sorts of business transactions, the same would be true with hash'ala and halva'ah from neighbors. You need a little bit more sugar. You need a little bit more. You need a few more eggs to borrow from your neighbor. As long as it's done in a discreet way, where no measurement or no midah in mishkal is mentioned, and you don't say lend me or borrow me. You don't use these kind of languages. Just say please give me. We'll take care of it after Shabbat. Something like that to that effect. That's permissible. That's okay. That's not a problem. Yes. No, the potatoes and the onions, I gave the example on Yom Tov. In the case of Shabbat, I gave the example of fruits and vegetables, intentionally because of that. Obviously, you can't cook on Shabbat. So I gave the example of fruits and vegetables. But on Yom Tov, if you need a little bit more potatoes and a little bit more onions, this would be a perfect solution, if you are allowed to carry in the area where you can ask your grocer man or your neighbor to please give you some. And after Shabbat, we'll take care of it. Okay, so that takes care of Kotev. Let's go over to Mohek. Mohek, there's not that many details. Nevertheless, it's an important halacha. Mohek means to erase. And erasing usually means, according to most opinions, erasing for the purpose of writing. In the Mishkan, we had ktiva and we had mechika. Ktiva was to put symbols, right, to write down numbers. We needed to have order. This wall comes after this wall. This partition comes before this partition. There had to be, so you had to have certain symbols. So the mechika, the erasing, was needed in case you made a mistake, to erase the wrong symbol and to correct it, right? Or just to erase so you can rewrite something else later on. So, plainly speaking, erasing, that is a sunnah Torah, according to all opinions, erasing with the intent of rewriting on that surface. Or erasing something that was written mistakenly, erroneously, and correcting it. However, what's included here is also mehikat stam. According to other opinions, even stam, just to blot out. Typical example, whiteout. Right? If you just blot out a letter, a word with whiteout, that's mehikat stam. You're not necessarily going to write something else on top of that. That's also asur. So as far as we're concerned, both forms of mehikah, whether you're going to rewrite or correct, or when you're just going to blot out what is already written there, with whiteout as an example, that's called muhakinat asur. Another type of muhakinat asur is mehikat rishum, whether you use girud, albana is the whiteout. If you scrape it off, it doesn't have to be that you use a chalk, an eraser, right? Whether it's a pencil eraser, whether it's the eraser for the blackboard, it could even be to scrape off. Scraping off would also be a form of mehikah, that would be asur. What would be asur min rabbanan is hashchatat otiyot. Hashchatat means to destroy. Let's say you don't have something in print, you just have something that you formed on wood or on plastic, and you break it, you destroy it, that will be asur min rabbanan. Because really the rabbanan said that mehikah is asur on any chomer, on any material, because it resembles the real thing. So even though you're breaking it or destroying it, you're not really erasing or blotting it out, it's also a form of muhakin, it's also asur on Shabbat. As we said before, a lot of these, there may be other melachot involved. You might be tearing, koreh, right? There might be mechatech. There might be all sorts of problems in doing one of these. But, midrabanan at least, it's also asur because of mohek, to destroy the letter. So now we come to your famous question from before. What do we do with cakes and cookies? Okay? Cakes and cookies. Or, today you can put a photograph on a cake, right? A beautiful photograph, and everybody wants the head. Right? A beautiful photograph on the cake. Can you have it on Shabbat? And the answer is yeah, no problem. Why? Yeah, there's a leniency with food because this is not real writing. And the reason why this is not real writing is because it's part of the food. As opposed to what? As opposed to if you actually had something else on top of the cake that was not cake, that would pose a little bit of a problem. Something that was made from some other material that they put to the decoration of the cake, that was not made of the cake, that may, according to some opinions, that may be the problem. That you would have to be careful of. But if the writing, the inscription, the picture is part of the cake, so it's part of the cake, it's not a problem. That's not called real writing. It's not something permanent, for sure not. It's meant to be eaten. The same is true with biscuits that have, some name or some letters on them that will, with the water, it will dissolve, right? It would not be a problem. So whether it's letters or pictures made from the actual cake or cookie, it's permissible, isn't it? Yeah, alphabets, for example, no problem. No problem. It's the food. Well, with wrappers, that's a good question. We discussed that when we spoke about Korea, that you have to be careful as much as possible when you're opening up a bottle, opening up a bag, not to intentionally cut by the letters. Right, if you have no choice, you're trying to get to the food, so you're not intentionally destroying the letters. So, but there's no doubt that you can't do it for no reason. The only leniency is you're trying to get to the food. So you're careful, and you can't get to the food unless you tear it, and it's okay, it's perfectly fine. Same thing with the bandage, same idea. That the letters, right? Yeah, no problem. Alright, we spoke a little bit about this before. Just like you can put letters together that already are existing, you just bring them close together. You're not writing, but bringing letters that exist together. In the same way, mutar lafrid, if you have letters, you can remove the letters and separate letters. There was once a question that they asked from Moshe Feinstein. There was a shul that had, you see this curtain? It's a parochet. You see it here it's one piece. How do you open it? You swing it to the right or to the left. This particular one, this shul, was made of two pieces. And it had, I don't know which letters, but it had, imagine, keter on one and Torah on the other. And when you opened and closed it, you were like breaking up the letters. They asked the question, even though it's not assuming doraita, obviously, it's not real writing or erasing, it was still a question that they had in mind. Obviously, this is not the way the parochet should be. Parochet should be one piece, okay? No, this is one piece, okay, right? Still, the answer was that the Tshuva says that it's permissible for them to open it and close it, if there's no other way, but they should leave it a little bit open, okay? Yeah. What? When they close it, they should leave it a little bit open, right? The point is that that's not real k'tiva. Similar to the chibur or pirud ha'otiyot, letters that are already in existence, you can bring them together, separate them. Nevertheless, it was still a question, and they posed that question, and the answer was that obviously the best thing is for them to get a better parochet, but there was no issue. Alright, the next example is, let's say you have a book that has on the pages stamped, this book belongs to this congregation, or you borrow a book from the library, right? The Los Angeles Public Library, right? On the, you know what I mean? Stamp, right? Remember? Ktiva, in Ktiva, I may not have mentioned that or it wasn't clear. Ktiva can be done in any form. It could be even with a stamp, right? It leaves an impression, just like fingerprints. So mehika, erasing, can also be, if you're erasing a stamp or a letter which was stamped or written, makes no difference. It would still be a form of mehika. The problem here is that this is not a real stamp because it's all over many, many pages. It's not really intact. It's scattered. So there's quite a few rabbis that say that you don't have to worry about it. That it's completely mutar. Some say if you have another siddur, obviously you should use the other siddur, not that one. But we are lenient with this. If you have a book, a siddur that has some lettering on the pages, it's permissible. No problem. Okay, real mehika involves only erasing simanim bale mashmaut, meaning in other words something that has some significance. In other words, meaning or significance. Just a scribble, like we said before, or not a scribble in this case, something that has no meaning that you erase or break is not called real mehika. Real mehika has, just like writing has to have meaning. What you wrote has to have some meaning. The same thing in mehika has to be erasing something that has meaning. However, as you will see in the following 2 points, that sometimes it makes no difference whether there's meaning or not. Let's say you have some ink on your hands, on your skin. You cannot wash off that ink on Shabbat. Because that stain, or any stain that is on a surface that you can write on, that's the big difference here. If what you're about to do is remove stains, even stains, from a surface like a wall or a table. These are the 2 typical surfaces where you can write on. Wall and table. Even stains cannot be removed on Shabbat because of mohek. So what do you do if you just went to Disneyland and they stamped your hand and you forgot to remove that on Friday, and now you want to wash your hands from Motzila Haminares? By washing your hands, you may be removing the stain. So what do you do? Right? That's why we're here. Right? So if the washing usually of the water usually does not remove the stain, just by pouring yourself water. So usually you can do that. But you have to be careful when you rub your hands or when you dry your hands. If you know that the drying of the hands may remove that, then don't dry your hands. That's okay. Yeah. The main point here with cleaning stains is if you don't intentionally clean the stain, it's permissible. If it happens by itself, it happens. But that's the problem with the towel. With the towel, it's almost like you're actually doing that. With the washing, all you want to do is wash your hands from Mosila Haminalis. If it happens, it happens. Now, the problem really is, if you know for sure it's going to come off, that's where it begins to become problematic. You need to ask the boy to do it. You cannot remove stains on Shabbat, the skin. You cannot, just like you cannot remove it from any other surface. Stains cannot be removed, certain stains. We're not talking about dirt here, but especially stains. There was something that was left from some print, whether it's on your skin, on a table, or on a wall. These are all surfaces where you can write on. So removing the stain is a form of mohek. If it's for sure going to come off with the water, then you may want to ask the boy to do it for you. So obviously, usually, when you have some sort of stain left over, and you just wash your hands from Mosila Hamanaz, usually nothing is going to happen. You just have to be careful not to scrub too hard and intention moving, that's all. I don't know of any real stains that's just going to easily come off by just pouring a little bit of water. No, you can't intention. Yeah, but intentionally you should not remove it. Right. Still, it's a keten, right? Tamim on any surface, table, wall, right? You have a chalkboard, you have a wall, you have some tamim, some writing. You cannot remove it on Shabbat. It's a form of mohek. So if it's on your hand, you're allowed to pour water as long as you don't intentionally remove the stain. Yeah, but for what purpose? What are you going to use this for? With liquid soap, right? Okay, right. As long as you don't intentionally do it, but if you know it's going to come off, then so you have to be careful with stains in your hand. That's all. The washing is okay, but you have to be careful when you dry it or when you rub it that you don't intentionally. Okay, that does it for tonight.